All right. Elevation Nation, one of the most beautiful parts of having a podcast and building this community of elevators is when we have one elevator say, you got to meet this other guy. They got to come on your podcast. You guys are going to hit it off. And, you know, sometimes I'm going to be honest, it's not the best fit. Not everyone can match my vibe or my energy. But I hopped on an intro call, and special shout out to Elevator Mike Perkson for this intro, because this man that we are having on the show this evening, I'm excited to not only share his story, share some of his wisdom when it comes to the corporate working world, but selfishly, I'm just excited that I can now call Harris a friend, because he's doing amazing things in the world when it comes to entrepreneurship and being a young adult, having just gotten married and had his first kid. I know Parker just got engaged, and I've been making fun of Parker that he's got a kid on the way soon. So we might have to get into that a little bit. But Harris Fanaroff, welcome to Elevation Nation, my friend. It is an honor and a privilege to have you on the show.
Excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me. You guys are awesome, and I can't wait for the conversation.
I'm pumped, but Sam, I'm putting it out there first. Like, the kid conversation needs to go away. I got to get married first, and that's not for like another 10 more months. So JJ might be a little bit, whatever about the kid thing. We got a lot of things coming first. But Harris, man, I'm pumped. This is going to be fun. I was telling Sam, and I was telling you before, like, I was like 3-4 years ago, like, you write a lot of LinkedIn content. Like, I've seen your stuff. I read your stuff, and I engage with it. It's great. It's amazing. I send it to other people. So, I mean, this is pretty cool. I will have to say. This is pretty awesome. So, Harris, we start off every podcast. You asked me for my elevator pitch when we first met. It is Elevation Nation, so I got to ask you for your elevator pitch so Elevation Nation can know a little bit more about who you are.
Awesome. So I'll start off with the sales elevator pitch, which is ironic because what I do is I make sales teams more effective and new hires productive quicker. Everything that I do evolves around that concept and that problem of sales reps need time to develop. They need a space to be able to be coached, and companies want to make their people productive quicker. So at a business level, that's what I do. I know we're here to talk on the personal side. I have, let's give you the short version. I was drafted out of high school by the Nats in baseball, went through the yips. It was absolutely brutal. The yips is basically where your arm and your brain forget how to communicate. And so I played baseball since the age of 3 years old. And then at age 18 or 19, I forgot how to throw. And so that was devastating and rocked my life. And I was lucky to be surrounded by a good support system that prevented me from going into a really, really dark place. I did go into a pretty dark place, but I'll always be grateful for that. And it's led me into the world of entrepreneurship. So we can go more into that. But the short pitch is struggled immensely. Am getting through it. I've gotten through it to the extent and excited to be where I'm at right now.
I appreciate you kind of shedding a little bit of the light on some of your early on struggles, and I'd love to talk about those for a minute, Harris, before we get into all the amazing things you've accomplished, because I think we all can relate to having that dream as a young kid. I know for Parker, one of his dreams was to be a professional athlete. Harris, we haven't met in person yet, but I'm like 5'8", so I knew that probably wasn't going to happen for me, but I did dream of working at ESPN. And so we all have that childhood vision for what we think our life is going to be like. And I would say out of all three of us, you probably came the closest to having that dream become a reality. Can you talk to us a little bit about hitting that milestone of being drafted, right? And then obviously the yips happening and going into a different place and having to really rethink your life.
So at about sixth grade, which is pretty weird now that I know what a sixth grader actually thinks about with like cousins and nieces and nephews around that age. Like, I decided I'm going to spend my whole life trying to play Division I baseball. That was going to be my goal. Nobody in my family really had played to a sport that level. And I said, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to build my life around it. And I really turned my identity into I was a baseball player, and that was who I was, which in retrospect now probably wasn't the smartest way for me to approach my life. I mean, when I had success in baseball, I was happy. When I didn't have success, I was upset. And I really think that was a big mistake that I made. And it was totally on my own. My parents did not push it on me at all. They were unbelievably supportive and helpful and loving and good for me and everything. But it was totally a pressure that I put on myself. My way to differentiate myself from everybody in my world was like, this is who I was. And so I wrapped my whole identity around it. It was really good until I forgot how to throw a baseball and was having zero success. And then it was sitting there being like, okay, I say I'm a baseball player that doesn't know how to throw, or even later on, I quit baseball because I just hated it that much. And now I was, okay, I'm just this random college guy. And I really, really struggled with identity issues. I was incredibly lucky to be connected to somebody who was a leadership coach. And I met him and he was like, hey, I'm going through a coaching program. I have to take on a client as part of this. Would you want to do it? And I met him and I'm like, I have no idea what leadership coaching is. You seem like a good dude. Let's give this a shot. And it totally changed my life. Having 10 conversations with him, like unpacking that big issue I went through from an identity, from a baseball perspective, was totally life-changing. And I had been to therapy before and that didn't do it for me. This coaching did. And so I walked out of that and said, I want to do this for other people. And we can go into the longer story, but essentially it was a massive failure that led me into this world of entrepreneurship and HR and actually finding a coach at the right time.
It's so interesting. Like, we've had 235 episodes of the podcast, Harris, and like, it's really cool to hear all these amazing people elevate, and they are getting to that point where they start to feel like they're elevating after they fail or after they go through something that is really challenging. And I'm sure, I mean, I wasn't in your position. I've never felt like, you know, I was going to be able to make it as a professional baseball player at any point. Well, maybe at some point, like 8th grade or so. But what I'm saying is I can imagine that being really difficult, like really, really challenging and difficult, as you put it. But when you had that conversation with that leadership coach and you made that decision, was it like, I'm just going to do it and see where it takes me? Or did you actually feel like you knew where this could take you down the road?
I had no idea where it would take me,
okay.
And it has evolved 432 times and will continue to evolve 1,000 more times. I think I have a pretty good sense, and that's literally within the last few weeks I've gotten clearer and clearer. I think that there is no straight line in entrepreneurship. If this is a path that you're willing to go down, and it is a hard one, then you have to be willing to get punched in the face 1,000 times and just keep getting up. And I have been, even where I say, like, I don't want to say I figured it all out. I'm still getting punched in the mouth and I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think it's that approach and that mentality. I know you all talk a lot about mindset, but it's like, I have to be okay with taking on those failures, taking on those hits, and just continuing to evolve. And it will continue to evolve. Otherwise, I will not be successful. It's like the mindset that I take.
How long have you been doing it? So, like, when was that first conversation with that leadership guy?
2016. So we are in 2023.
Wow.
7-8 years.
So you've been at it. You've been at it for a while, is what you're saying.
I've been at it a while.
I mean,
and
maybe.
I still don't have it all. And it has evolved so much in what my entrepreneurship journey is. But I love what you're saying, that it resonates so much that, like, anyone that I've seen have any great success has had a big, massive failure right alongside of it. I think in a way, you don't have that drive or that push to be able to go through the tough parts of entrepreneurship without it. And so that's actually how I reframed this big, massive baseball failure, was like, it was the big failure that I needed in order to have success, the success that I want from a business perspective. And without it, I don't know if I would have had the drive. And that motivates me every single day, is like, I want to make a name for myself, because I didn't in the baseball world. And whether that's healthy or not, the jury's still out on, but that is a big driving force around why I want to be successful. Obviously, the aspects of supporting my family are all behind that, but having that failure helps me continue to drive and wake up and get those no's and keep moving forward.
I want to talk for a second, and Harris, this is going totally different direction than what I prepared for, which I love, and these are our best conversations. So I'm going to go down a different rabbit hole here. You talked a lot about your identity, right? And one of the reasons you mentioned of wanting to try to become a baseball player was to differentiate yourself and to find that unique identity. And I'm going to get a little vulnerable and introspective here for a minute, if it's cool with you guys. I'm pretty sure only my therapist knows this like true deep rooted part of who I am. But all throughout high school, I played sports, I was president of clubs, and I did what I was supposed to do, right? I did everything right, got good grades. In fact, I didn't even go to parties or drink. Like, I was that scared of getting in trouble and ruining the trajectory of my life. And people ask me all the time, how did you go to Maryland from Chicago? Like, not a lot of people go all the way out here for school. And, at the time I was like, I wanted a Big Ten school. They got a great basketball team, whatever, right? Like, I came up with all these things. Truly, when it came down to it, I wanted to be different because I felt as though if I went to the same school that all my friends went to, that maybe partied or had more fun or weren't on the straight and narrow or didn't work as hard as me and went to some of those normal schools for a Chicagoland kid, I would have felt like I wasted away my like high school experience by staying on that straight and narrow path. And so we talk a lot in Elevation Nation about, who you are, your sense of self, your self-awareness. And I think it's taken me a long time to figure out that deep-rooted insecurity of me trying to be unique and different is, why I went to Maryland. And honestly, probably a little bit of why I keep doing Elevation Nation, right? Like, I can't just have a job. Like, I have to have something different. And so I think that's something good to recognize, but also part of who I am now is part of my identity is trying to be a little bit different. And so that point that you said really resonated with me because I think we're all just trying to find ways to be a little bit unique at the end of the day.
Are you saying I'm your therapist, by the way? Is that
you already knew that, Parker?
I was going to say, because you said that only one person knew that, and I knew that.
But
I also consider myself a little bit like your informal therapist. I mean, Elevation Nation.
I don't pay you enough.
You don't pay me anything. How about that?
I think to Sam, to your point, you got to be wired differently. You have to be a little bit, for lack of a better term, crazy to try to be an entrepreneur. I just think you do. My favorite, outside of this one, obviously my favorite podcast that I listen to is called The Crazy Ones, and it's all about entrepreneurs and the crazy stories that they do to take on a business. You have to be crazy. Your odds of success are so low. You have so much failure. You have to put out. You have to put your family financials in a way. I put this out like over the weekend or something, and this is taking us in a whole different route, so I apologize. But like, the most underrated member of a startup is the founder's significant other, because they have to deal with so much. Can we curse in this podcast or no? They have to deal with so much. They have to deal with so much shit from the founder, and it is so hard for them. And it's just not talked about enough. Like, you're putting the financials at risk. You have to deal with all the crazy ideas that they come up with. I'm sure Parker's fiance is like, if Parker brings another crazy idea to me where he's going to make $1 billion, like, I'm going to lose my mind. But that's just like the way of life. And that's just, so I just agree with you. And I think it's what brings us together. I think it's why we connected when we first talked. Yeah.
Harris, do you think, I've thought about this question a lot, and there's so many entrepreneurs out there, right? There's a lot that fail, and there are a lot who find success. And I'm really curious about that success portion, that the population of people who make it, right? Are they successful, do you think, because they got lucky and they just were in a business, an industry that was on the come up, they had a good idea? Or do you think they're fully like embedded with passion and driven by that passion, which led to that eventual success?
I think it's a combination of both. The easy answer is the second one, which obviously plays a big role in path. I don't know what the statistic is, but I always see this pulled up there that like 10% of startups actually have success, but a significantly higher number of founders have success. And because your first version is probably not going to have success, you just don't know what it takes. You think that everybody is going to be interested in your idea. The second one, you learn a little bit more, but you still don't really know what it takes until 3, 4, 5 down the road. And I have experienced that. I mean, this is the third company that I founded. The first 2 were fine. I made a little bit of money, but like, and I don't even know if 3 is going to be the big one. I'm just going to keep getting up and taking at bats with the hopes that one of them is, and keep pouring my heart into it and hope that the timing is right and I get the right product. But like, at the end of the day, I think the more at bats you take, the more success you're going to have. But as far as like first time founders, it is so, I'd argue, almost impossible to be a really, really financially successful first time founder.
I asked a question because Sam and I felt this when we started our first company. It's a company called Hired You. We graduated college. Sam and I were like, we want to help college kids navigate the internship and job process. Basically, what we were doing was coaching and resume review for college kids. And we made a good amount of money doing it, honestly. We created a course that people could buy. And what was really interesting, and we learned very quickly that our passion for it was not 100%. We did not love spending our evenings coaching, talking about resumes all day, every day. That was not what we wanted to do. And for so long, we were chasing that dollar as a new young adult in the real world. And when we made the switch to Elevation Nation, we said to ourselves, we're not putting money first. Money comes second. Let's just lead with our passion in meeting people and helping people. And now, we're 3 years into this thing, and I'm still passionate about it. I hope Sam, I feel it, as his therapist, is still passionate about it. And we think that money will eventually come. And the reason why I asked that first question to you, Harris, was like, the ones that end up winning, is it because they're leading with money, or they're truly passionate about that mission that they're on to solve?
I actually, like, the point that you just made was one of the reasons why I really liked Sam when we first connected. I could sense that passion for what you all were building, and there's a lot of people with podcasts, and there's a lot of, but it's like what you all are doing. I believe in your mission. I believe in the passion you are bringing behind it, and I love that. And you can sense it in the two of you talking, which I think is the biggest thing. And like, if you're passionate about the mission, like, you're going to figure out the monetary aspect. I mean, the fact that you all have done 235 plus podcasts is unbelievably impressive and speaks to your passion towards it. You wouldn't do that many if you weren't in it for the passion. You would have given up after 3. I mean, there's some, you all would know this better. And there's some wild statistic that like 90% of podcasts stop after 10 episodes, or maybe it's even less than that. It's amazing that you all have done 235. So kudos to y'all for continuing to push through and doing it. Shows to your passion.
Well, thank you, Harris. That means a lot. And I think the coolest part about us connecting is at one point, all of us started from nothing. And Harris, you are, let's be honest, whether you like it or not, you're kind of like an influencer now, man. Maybe a little like a LinkedIn newsletter influencer. I'm not sure if you've accepted that reality. But with that in mind, at one point, we all were nobody. And so I think sometimes back to when we first started Elevation Nation and when you first started your journey of both your personal brand and actually your company, which we'll get into in a minute here, no one wanted to listen to us. No one really cared what we had to say. And now, like, the fact that, one, we got to steal, Harris, an hour of your time means a ton, because I know you get a lot of these requests. And then 2, Parker and I are putting out stuff, and we have people reach out to us and say, we've never met, have no mutual friends, and say, thank you so much. I was going through X, Y, and Z. And so to Parker's point, and we don't have to beat a dead horse here, but if you lead with passion and actually trying to help people, the influence that you will have and the positivity that you generate and the lessons that you will help instill in others will spread and be infectious. And so that's what's really cool about this whole creator economy, even though I hate social media, I will admit it. I think it's good that we all can kind of reach people, and that's the fun part too with building companies.
So I'm your therapist and your social media coordinator.
Yeah, you got a lot of roles, man.
Yeah, definitely.
Welcome to entrepreneurship. Wear a lot of hats.
Exactly. I'll put it on my LinkedIn. How about that?
Yep, I love it. All right, so Harris, we talked a little bit about mindset when we started the podcast, and I know you and I have talked about it ad nauseum, especially for young adults. And so when we think about Elevation Nation and what the nation has grown into, it really started out of necessity for Parker and myself to figure out what the heck young adulthood is and what your 20s are and your early 30s are. And, you know, you go to school to learn things, but you kind of got to just go after life. And so what we did was we took a step back and came up with this concept we like to call mental fortitude. And we thought that was the missing piece to help us unlock young adulthood and feel fulfilled and successful. And so I want to break it down for you because I think we already talked about the first part with your story. So mental fortitude to us has 3 parts: knowing who you are, so self-awareness; vision, knowing where you want to go; and then third, fuel, what fuels you, what drives you, what gets you out of bed in the morning. And so we talked in the beginning with your story, trying to be unique, kind of having that identity crisis when baseball and that professional career didn't work out. So we now have covered the self-awareness part of your story, Harris, which I think is great. And to Elevation Nation, not to get too preachy here, but folks that are listening and saying, well, I don't know who I am. I don't know the person that I am. I'm young. I'm still figuring that out. For one, I would say that's okay, and that's great. 2, I would say you never stop figuring it out. Harris just said he's been figuring it out 3 weeks ago, right? Like Parker and I are still figuring it out. You're always a work in progress of figuring out who you are as you evolve. So I don't want anyone to have the excuse of, oh, I'm young, I don't know who I am yet. You're young, start to learn who you are at that moment in time. It's not who you are forever. So that's on the self-awareness piece, but I want to talk a little bit about vision, right? Because a lot of times we have dreams, and I know I definitely can picture baby Parker because he had like a lazy eye, which we'll send you pictures of before, but probably one of my favorite images of Parker. But I can picture baby Harris too, and, you know, playing catch in the yard and having these dreams and this vision of being, you know, a professional baseball player. When you had that self-realization, taking a step back of, all right, I need to redefine who I am and what makes Harris unique, you then needed to come up with different dreams. How did you go about reconfiguring that vision? Because that's not easy. Dreams that have been with you your whole life.
It's a really good question. It's a really good point. I think first off, you mourn a little bit around like who you are going to be and how that's not going to be you. And I think sitting in the allowing yourself to mourn is an important thing to do, and that takes a lot of time, whether you're mourning being done as CEO of a company or you're mourning being done as a baseball player or whatever it is. That takes time to sit and allow to do. I was lucky to have a coach to be able to do it. It can be a therapist, it can be a friend, it can be whatever it is. I think you need to take that time to be open and out loud about it. What I did that helped me was I wrote down what I liked about being a baseball player, and it was 20 things, and 0 of them had to do with like my talent or really like an ability to throw a bit. It was like meeting with my teammates, developing those relationships, working towards a goal and accomplishing it. Like none of it was really related to hitting a baseball and or throwing a baseball. And that helped me separate who I was as a baseball player to like what I really was passionate about and cared about. And like, I am a connector. I love building relationships with people. I get energy from hitting goals. Like that is what I love to do, which led me to the crossroads of HR and sales. Like those two just made sense I love people and I love going towards goals. Like HR and sales makes so much sense of that concept, but it took me a lot of deep work, conversations, figuring out, finding people who were similar that led me to this. And it's still an ever evolving journey. I mean, I started out after being coach being like, I'm going to be a coach. And it's like, actually, I want to build something that's bigger and greater than just myself. And I don't think I can do that as an individual coach. And that's what led me to wanting to build more of a company. And I really have a goal, and this is so aligned with what you all do. Too many people hate their work. Too many people are like, it's Sunday. God damn it. I have to go to work on Monday. Like, I want to live in a world where that's not the case. People get excited to go to work on Monday and they don't dread going to, I just hate that concept. You spend, I think it's 90,000 hours plus of our life at work. Like, how do you make it a case where people do not hate that and they get excited to do it? That is a world that I want to live in.
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about work, especially for the young adult.
You now got Parker's HR brain
me.
geeking out.
I'm
I
here.
told you, Harris.
I've always been here.
Here we go.
Just saying.
All right.
I'm sitting here, Sam. Let's talk about work. Young adulthood. Let's talk about the last 5 years in particular. People are in the office. People get sent home. They feel connected through the internet to their company, which I think disconnected a ton of people. And now we're back. And now companies are going back and forth and everything in between, sending people to the office, not. People are working from home from all over the world, but there are people I work with I've never met in my entire life. Harris, what do you think is one of those challenges that you see that is making it more difficult for people to love their work?
Great question. People feel like, I'll go with it in the remote world, people feel like they're on an island. If you haven't met any of those people, why should they feel any type of connection or affinity to you and your organization? I think a lot of organizations struggle to do that. And I think companies really need to do a better job of building that connection and affinity for people and showing that they care. And that just does not tend to happen very much. I think the company side would say, well, Parker's going to leave me in 6 to 18 months. The studies show that. So why should I actually invest in him? It's like, well, that's a never ending cycle of having to spend all this money recruiting and hiring rather than like training and developing. And so it's sort of a chicken or the egg kind of issue. But I think the companies that are focusing on, one, figuring out what motivates your people, building connections and relationships, and then developing. So those big three, figuring out what motivates, building relationships, and developing the people, like developing them, are the ones that have been successful in keeping their people. You just have to be intentional about it.
So from like a developing standpoint, that's I think a big one for me, because I work from home 95% of the time, unless I'm at my client site with other people on my team. But I work with people all over the world, and I feel like at times it's a challenge to develop my skill set. And in the industry that I'm in, you develop your skill set from doing, right, and getting that experience from the projects that we work on, the exposure, the meetings. But I still feel as if there's something missing from a development standpoint. Like I don't learn from looking at a video on a screen of someone talking at me for an hour. That's just not how I am. And I personally am just really I'm pessimistic that companies are doing enough to develop individuals, especially the ones who are working remotely, because I think the true development of an individual has to happen in person. It has to happen from an in-person experience, whether it's from training people on how to public speak, training people on how to develop their communication skills in a meeting, even problem solving in person, to growing like your leadership skills even outside of like an office space, like things that you learn from like team building activities. How good is that from a sense of doing it while looking at a computer? I don't know, I'm pessimistic about it, to be honest with you, which poses an opportunity for us to change that.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, and the more global companies are, the harder this becomes. But I do agree with you that there is only a certain amount of connection you can build with somebody remote. I mean, I actually do fully believe that. I think that hybrid and doing some amount in person is the wave of the future, is the way to do it. Not the wave of the future, it's hard to hear. If you can. One of the things that you talked about that I help companies with as part of where I've landed in my entrepreneurship journey is what tends to happen. I really focus on sales part of the company is where I tend to work. But what tends to happen is your head of sales maybe gets an individual coach, and what they'll do is they'll bring in somebody to do a workshop maybe once a half or twice a year, once a year on a specific thing. What doesn't tend to happen is your sales reps and or sales managers don't get individualized coaching on real-time issues when they need it. And so one of the things that we've created that has been like our biggest offering is we have monthly hours that we make available to all the sales reps. So say it's a 10-person sales group. Each person will get an opportunity to have 1 hour of coaching per month on the area that they think is most of interest for them. So we have them take an assessment up front that's like a sales aptitude assessment. We say, hey, goal-oriented or motivation or whatever it is the area that you're struggling with. And that is kind of the thread, but essentially what they get to do is each month have their opportunity one-on-one with a coach. And so I think you can still do that remotely. I agree it's better if you can develop that relationship at some point in person, but giving that person individualized coaching is the way that I've seen companies do this at scale while still investing in their people. So it's been a really big offering and something that more and more companies have been investing in, which has been really cool to see.
And that's how you build connections with people, right? And Parker, and I don't fully agree with your point that everything needs to be done in person, because I would be a hypocrite if I said that, because I moved out of the city that I technically work in. But I hear you, right? It's good to build relationships in person, but I also think one-on-one virtually is another way, not one-on-one solving the problem of whatever project you're on, but one-on-one, Harris, to your point of trying to get coached and learn and mentor and talk about life, that I think is helpful. So I totally agree with that point. I think one thing I wanted to bring up, Harris, that I think ties a little bit into your story, which is something that I think a lot of people that listen to Elevation Nation are going through, which is joining the real world fresh out of school and going, man, I hate my job, but I also have never had a job. So do I just hate work? And so I want to talk about that for a second, because your dream scenario is people loving what they do. And I think everyone wants to love what they do. But as a young person who, for me, for example, I worked at a mini golf course in high school. That was my job. I loved it. It was great. I handed people putters all day. It was not difficult. But to compare that to working at Big Four Consulting or something of the likes is difficult. So I'm curious if you, with your HR experience and your personal experience of changing career paths a bit, how did you know when it was time to pivot or when it's time to suck it up, grind your teeth, and try to push through?
It's a really smart question, because I also went through, my first job out of college was brutal. I was calling 100 times a day chief nursing officers at every hospital in the country, and it was brutal, absolutely brutal. And I don't think I would have anywhere near the type of success that I've had without being able to do that. And so I don't have a good answer to that. Besides, I think that there's value in embracing the suck, which is the big Navy saying around this. It's there are good things to learn through your first job, and your first job might not be the best. I think when you get up into the later parts and you're in your 30s or 40s and you're still disliking your career, that is when it becomes problematic. I guess to your question, which was a really good one, is well, people right out of college hate their jobs. I don't know if there's what the right answer is to that, because it is such a problem. Someone has to do it for entry level work. It is I dealt with it. Everyone that I went with, everyone that I started with dealt with it. It's a huge problem. I heard
something funny on this, and so you're never going to guess the podcast I was listening to that talked about this problem, and why I'm so glad we got to bring it up and tie it to your story, Harris. Pardon My Take the other day, a Barstool podcast, sports show. If folks have listened to it, it's definitely not the place you'd go for career advice. But a couple of the hosts were actually talking about, fresh out of college, feeling like they were not making an impact, feeling unfulfilled, miserable, like they were grinding and figuring out when to leave. And they gave some pretty decent advice that I actually really liked, which is, to everyone's point, you have to embrace the suck. You have to grind your teeth. I know Parker's told this story many times, but you come from college and seniors and big man on campus making a huge impact, and then no one gives a shit what you have to say. And you're not really going to make an impact at big companies. Whether you think you're amazing or not, you're still a low man on the totem pole. And so that transition's hard no matter what. But the advice that they gave that I loved was, as soon as work starts spilling over into your personal life and causing you emotional distress, that's when it's time to maybe at least time box the suck, right? I'm not saying that you have to quit right away as soon as you think about work outside of working hours, because I will also never forget when I had my first work nightmare. They happen. But as soon as that becomes a recurring theme where you're getting constant anxiety, maybe even a little depression, nervousness outside of working hours or on weekends, it's all you think about, that's probably the time when you need to take a step back and say, is this suck worth embracing?
I like that. I like that a lot. And I think the other piece of advice I'd say is like you have 9 to 5 to do your job that is tough, but you have 5 to 10 to do something that you love and start to build on the side. Exactly what you guys are doing right here. And not to say that you dislike your full-time gigs, but like you have so much more you have hours to do what you love and use that time to be able to do it. So I think you're not sectioned to what is going on in your 9 to 5, and you all are showing exactly like if you have a passion for something, do it in your 5 to 10. That I think is a severely underrated tactic.
I'm very open about how my first 2 years at the company I work at still, I was miserable. I hated it every single day. I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like I was not of value in any way, shape, or form. I'd go to work highly anxious every day, feeling like, man, like this is just never going anywhere. And then I found, I'm going to plug it, like Sam and I created this little framework of mental fortitude. Knowing who I was and knowing that really, really deeply and understanding that, knowing where I wanted to go and the fuel that kept me going, that inspired me, that kept going. And once I figured those things out, and we've been working on this thing for a while now, everything has changed. And it, from a mindset perspective, like I showed up to work, like this is who I am, this is what I bring to the table, and I was not putting myself in situations where I knew I would be maybe, it's not like a part of my skill set. I would only raise my hand for things I felt like I provided value for. I became an advocate of myself, and I advocated for myself based upon what I knew about myself, where I wanted to go, and what fueled my fire. And so I think being an advocate for yourself as a young adult is a great way to get out of that rut, that hating the work experience every day. Because what I've learned is in working in a massive company is that essentially you're a number. Essentially there's so many employees. It's just how it is. You got to put yourself out there to get where you want to go.
Great advice. Really, really smart. The more people that would take that and take ownership for what's going on in their career, the better they'd feel. And I think it's a big part is like taking ownership and knowing that you can change it and you can do stuff. I think that's the part that tends to be the toughest is people are like, this is all I'm just doing this and it sucks. It's like, no, you still have the opportunity to make changes and do what you want to do. And you all are great examples of that. So I love it.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual. I think we're all on this mission to try to make work in young adulthood and life just more fulfilling for people. And the coolest part about that is, Harris, obviously you do it with your company, which we haven't talked too much or enough about, but I love that we're getting a little bit more personal and introspective. Your newsletter, and then us, believe it or not, Parker's up in our TikTok game right now. So that's where we're trying to make an impact through TikTok.
I'm hiring Parker to run my TikTok. I don't do that yet.
He'll do therapy for free too, Harris.
Okay.
So therapy, social media coordinator, podcast producer, man, jack of all trades here, right?
There you go. Wear many hats. So Harris, I want to bring us to another section of the podcast here to make sure we're honoring your time. I know you're a busy man. This is what we call our rapid fire section. Quick hitting questions, no right or wrong answers. We haven't prepped you for them, but just a couple fun things that we want to ask to get to know you a little bit better. So I'm going to consider myself an honorary DMV guy, but you got 3 DMV guys right here. What is your favorite DC sports moment? I know you're a big DC sports guy. It's on your LinkedIn, in fact. What's your favorite DC sports moment?
The Caps winning the cup. I mean, that was just so cool. I mean, this is like crazy for me to say this out loud, but it probably goes, this is crazy. And I'm actually about to say Caps winning the cup is 2, and the Nats winning the cup is 3, and number 1 is what just happened, and it's Dan Snyder just selling the Redskins / Commanders. That's actually number 1 on the list. So everything else is lower after that. So we just reached the pinnacle.
The trauma through the screen.
The business of sports comes first, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Just to get them out, have a real adult running the organization. It's very exciting.
Dan Snyder, if you're listening, I think you could benefit from a little mental fortitude, my friend.
Yeah.
It might be time to rethink the value and
I don't
the
know.
vision.
He might be living, on the yacht for the rest of his life, just chilling, laughing. Like, I really screwed that franchise up. Hopefully he comes back.
$6.5 billion later. So
yeah. Oh man. Caps. I'm a big Caps fan too. Sam and I were in China when they won the Stanley Cup, and I had to watch on my little iPhone, like somehow getting a VPN and everything. Oh man! But we celebrated.
it's crazy.
Remember, Sam?
Yeah.
I do.
I was in downtown. I was right on F Street when they won.
Gosh.
I went to game 3, I think. They
That's
just
incredible.
dominate them. It was so cool. Nats was also awesome. That was a lot of fun.
I was in DC for Nats. That was incredible. I'm not a Nats fan, but that was cool. The vibe of the city just was amazing.
Unbelievable.
All right,
And
next
Parker,
one.
we're gonna have to. I mean, we gotta end it at least shouting out. We have a couple elevators as part of the Washington Wizards franchise, and so maybe the Wizards are next.
They
We'll
just
see.
got a new GM, new president. I think they're headed in the right direction finally. So
We like
sure
to
hope
think.
so.
We like to think. All right, next question. You're having a shitty day. What is the first thing that you do to take a step back and get your day back on track?
try to find time to exercise if I haven't already. That's going to be the best thing for me. Try to have a good meal. The quick answers like go outside. I think that's a big one. Like just I'll walk to the end of the block. I'm big into that though. Like if I can start to sense my energy getting low and bad, it's like, all right, I got to do something. This is not good. I think the biggest thing I learned from coaching was to live more intentionally. And I think being coached helped me do that. I think a lot of my life I lived on autopilot, and I try to be more intentional about how I show up all the time. It's just so that some of that comes with being like, oh my gosh, I am really not in a good place. Let me go outside. Let me find some time to work out, like whatever I need to do to get myself in a better spot.
It's funny you say that, and I won't go too deep into it, but yesterday, weekend, didn't get great night's sleep, woke up at around 6, was ready to go, get a workout in. I was like, no, let's sleep in a little bit, which was probably the worst thing I could have done. Slept in, and then you're like, once you commit to, all right, I'm sleeping in, it's not like I'll sleep in a little. It's like, all right, I'm sleeping in, and I'm really going to take advantage and catch up on sleep. I was in the worst mood yesterday. I was an asshole to everyone, and it's because I didn't work out. So there you go. Get your blood pumping.
I thought you were in a good mood.
Surprised.
So
Well, I had it from you well. All right, last rapid fire here. Parker and I love to read. Parker makes fun of me. I read on the Kindle. He is traditional and has a ton of books in his little New York City apartment. Harris, what's one book recommendation that you can give to us in Elevation Nation?
The Third Door by Alex Banayan, I think is how you say his name. It is all about how, and y'all would love this as entrepreneurs, it's all about this guy's story about how he got to meet and interview the richest, most famous, powerful people in the world. And it's like, you have to find nuanced ways to get a hold of them. And so it's like his story about how he did that. And so I love it. It's my favorite book I've ever read.
Wow. Okay. Add it to the list. There we go.
see, Sam adds it to the list. I add it to my bookshelf because it's already on the way. It's nice and
Let
quick.
me know what you think.
Amazon
Let me
goes
know
quick.
What you think.
I'll read it at some point. I've literally bought, Harris, like over the last year, every book that everyone's
It's awesome.
recommended.
It's
Like
really smart.
it's like what, $13? Okay, $13 a week. I get a book. My girlfriend, I'm sorry, my fiance is like, what are we doing with all these freaking books? I'm like, well, I'm building a library. And any of my friends in
love
New York
it.
City, they know they can come by, they can rent the book from the library, they can take it, and then they can bring it back. That's all it is. Everyone knows
That's
that.
awesome. I love that.
Cool. Well, we're down to the last section of the podcast. This is an Elevation Nation favorite because we ask every single person who has ever joined Elevation Nation this question about the mental motto. The mental motto being the phrase, the quote, the slogan that you live your life by. I have a mental motto. Sam has a mental motto. 125 plus people in Elevation Nation have a mental motto, Harris. So, what is yours?
We've talked a lot about my LinkedIn. It's at the top of my LinkedIn profile. It's from the great Ted Lasso. I think got it from Winston Churchill. Be curious, not judgmental. It's my favorite quote of all time. It's the best scene of all time in any show is when he darts. It's just unbelievable. So that's my mental model.
The coolest part about these mental mottos, every single person in Elevation Nation has had a different one, which is the craziest thing. Because there's a lot of cliche quotes out there, but the fact that everyone has something different is really special and really unique. And so part of what we're doing at Elevation Nation and kind of our new mission, Harris, is not only do people who come on Elevation Nation and become what we call elevators get a mental motto, Parker and I are now helping young adults around the world get mental mottos. And so a couple months ago, we got flown out to Chicago, Illinois, spoke at Prospect High School, and had about 200 to 300 young seniors and juniors in high school all develop their own mental mottos. And so that's just one little small thing that we think can help you gain some mental fortitude as you go on through young adulthood. And Harris, I knew this was going to be a great conversation and the start of a really special friendship when we first met. I'm really, really proud that you've made so much progress in figuring out who you are as a young adult, transitioning into entrepreneurship, and the fact that you're leading by just trying to make the world a better place, which unites all three of us as elevators. And so thank you for giving us time. I hear the little one in the background that's saying, Dad, I'm hungry. Let's go get this podcast over with. So I know how busy you are and truly can't thank you enough, man.
I was wondering if you all could hear my little guy, my 3-month-old in the background. Luckily, my wife is the best, and she's unbelievable at taking care of him. I am forever grateful to her for all the amazing job she does taking care of him and me, which is a full-time job. So I was wondering if you could hear the baby in the background, but that's awesome.
It makes it real. We love it. And like you said, entrepreneurial families are the real MVPs. So shout out to your wife and your little one. And seriously, man, this has been such a pleasure, and we can't thank you enough.
I enjoyed it, fellas. Thanks for your time.
All right, Sammy.
Elevation Nation, until next week. Peace.